Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 5, Episode 12 of the Senstennial Podcast. And we are coming at you with a no longer winless 2024 Sens squad. Biggest win of the season against one of the best and brightest teams in the league, the San Jose Sharks. I don't know if they've been relegated yet, but Ottawa did manage to beat them. Tough squad for sure. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, our feelings after that game, and where we're currently at as Sens fans. We're going to talk about some of the trade rumors that have started floating out there. And we have a mailbag question that we got from a listener, and we're going to answer that one. So let's get to it. First, off the top of the show, I got to throw it to Bennett first, because Bennett, it was your son's first ever NHL game. You know, he's the good luck charm now. We got the win. How did he enjoy the game? And what were your thoughts on the Sens picking up a victory in the dying seconds there?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, you said it right there. Felix is a good luck charm. For those of you who know your Latin, Felix does in fact mean lucky or fortunate in the old tongue. So it is something that we have commented on ourselves since we brought him home with us. Yeah, he got to experience a good one for his first NHL game. He did sleep through the first period and a half, but that's okay. Senators with the exciting 5-4 victory at home against San Jose. Like you said, San Jose, comfortably, I believe, the worst team in the league, and yet the Sens still made heavy weather of it. They threw away the lead a couple of times before scoring, Tarasenko scoring the winner with like 3 or 4 seconds left. So a very exciting conclusion, but one that you would expect, the Senators to do better at. The goaltending battle of the centuries between Korpisalo and Mackenzie Blackwood. And if you're losing a goaltending duel to Mackenzie Blackwood, you know that something is very wrong. But all that being said, Chuck played well, Stutzla played well. Chabot had a really nice goal to open his account for the year. So I think there's some positives to take out of that game, even if the result itself was a little I don't want to say underwhelming, but a little sort of like you would hope that the Senators can beat San Jose, and the fact that they only did it barely is a little concerning.
And I think I've told people before that my girlfriend's a Habs fan, and she was like, the Habs walked so the Sens could run, because the Habs were the ones that let San Jose end their 12-game losing streak. So she said that you're welcome for the Habs taking the L so the Sens could take the dub. Matt, I'll pass it over to you. And how'd you feel finally the Sens getting their first win of the season, or sorry, of the calendar year?
If it was the first one of the season, I think we would have folded the podcast, to be honest with you. I think watching the highlights, because I was having a Lord of the Rings marathon that day, because Ottawa had a very big dumping of snow. So I was doing that, and I was just keeping up with the score on my phone. And I think it was definitely frustrating to see, 2-0, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2. And the way I found that out was, Tkachuk ties it up. We tweeted that. And I got the phone notification, and I was thinking to myself, good gravy. Like, how does this team find themselves down to the San Jose Sharks? And it's simple. It's the story of the entire season. It's defensive gaffes and poor goaltending. It's hard not to blame it on the goalie, when I think San Jose had like 18 shots against, and there were 4 goals. I realize that some of those are, screens or what have it, a 3-on-1 that ends up, in the back of your net. But some of these are, you got to start getting some saves, and it's really frustrating when the guys are seemingly putting in a good effort on the offense, and then the defense just kind of fuddles it up. I don't think that Chabot and Chychrun should be a pairing. I don't think they complement each other whatsoever. And I really think Sanderson should probably play with Chychrun, and Chabot can play with a consistent partner like Zub. They've had good chemistry together. Or hell, Chabot and Brandstrom actually have really good metrics as well. So things like that, just tinkering. I'd like to see it, but as you said, they got out with the skin of their teeth. And I'm glad they won, but there are so many question marks about this team. And like, how big is that win going to be in the locker room, just like mentality wise? Because they haven't won in quite some time, and they are finally able to say, you know, we got to win. We can turn the page on a losing streak and go from there.
Yeah, and the next game is certainly going to be a test. They play the Colorado Avalanche, who beat the Leafs, so they're coming off of a win over obviously a more competitive team. So it'll be interesting to see how Ottawa plays. I know that Sogard was in the starters end at practice, so it'll be interesting to see if he gets a game in against the Avalanche. That'll be some tough competition, but hey, what's the worst that could happen at this point?
Yeah.
So yeah, but you know, I was in attendance at that game, just like Bennett, and got to give a shout out to my boy Zoo, because dude had 3 assists. Big night for him. You know, I can't get enough of that Zoo when the PA announcer, you know, starts announcing the name and everyone chimes in with the Zoo. Love that. And Stützle, 4 assist night. Really love that for him. I'm sure that helps him feel a bit better. I know he probably would like to convert some more shots into goals, but hey, getting some points on the board still must feel a bit good because he was having a streak of no points. So good for him. But, you know, let's move on from our feelings about the win and kind of where the Sens are at, as in like a, you know, what do we call that? More of like a minor way. And let's kind of look at the bigger picture. And, you know, what are your feelings on the Ottawa Senators as they stand, you know, while we're recording mid-January 2024? This is, I assume for all of us, not where we thought the team would be.
Yeah.
So what are your feelings on this team, where they stack up? And is there a certain aspect of the team that if you could change today and you thought it would be a necessary change for this team to take that next step, what would that be? And I'll throw it back to you, Matt, and give me your thoughts on that.
The challenge is, you know, we are fans, and we'd love to know who's available and who the Sens sort of view as a player that's going to be around for a really long time, or if they're expendable. I think we can probably get the names of like Tarasenko, Kubalik out of the way, and then you start looking at the guys that are, you know, probably sort of grown with the team. A guy like Brandstrom is probably not a long-term solution, which really bums me out, probably bums all of us out. We're a small king friendly podcast. And then you have to look at guys that aren't named Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, and Jake Sanderson. I think the biggest thing, I wouldn't look at this team and remove anything specifically. Well, I mean, if I could get Jake Ottinger in net, then I'd be very happy. But I'm not quite sure his stats in Dallas would look similar to his in hypothetical Ottawa. But I would probably say a capable right-handed defenseman that isn't, you know, Artem Zub is there obviously, and I do think he's a capable right-handed defenseman, but I mean another one. We don't have that. Jacob Bernard Docker and Travis Hamonic are spare parts. Those guys are not in the future plans of this team. It's actually abysmal that Travis Hamonic is still kicking around, because we had the opportunity to go out and utilize the cap space that was used on him on another depth defenseman that probably would provide quite a bit more value. And, you know, we were chatting about it at the start. Hamonic doesn't provide anything to this team. And really only old school hockey heads believe Hamonic does provide stuff to this team. And I think it's great to be a good leader in the room or a good guy in the room. But to be perfectly frank, if that's all you're really providing, then what's the point of you? Like, just become a coach. That's our biggest issue. We don't have a lot of versatility on the back end, and adding a right shot defenseman would be huge. And we've been looking for that for 4 years now. It's crazy that every year we can always look and say, oh, we need to add a right shot defenseman. And there were guys available. There was Sean Walker, there was Sean
Dursey.
Sean Dursey. Wait, isn't it Sean Walker too, or on Philly?
Probably. LA likes their guys named Sean, and they trade them.
Right? And both of those guys were available and would have been, would have cost not a lot, and now they're thriving on their respective teams. These are guys that Pierre Dorion was lazy enough to not go look at, and now we are reaping the rewards of that. I have a big problem with that, and our defense is just consistently not good enough, and it can always improve.
All right. Respectable answer, and I'll definitely touch on your thoughts in a bit, but I want to get Bennett's thoughts as well. And, your feelings overall on the roster, where they sit right now, and, what change you see as most necessary to get this team to the next level and truly be in the conversation for playoffs next season.
Yeah, I've alluded to on socials and everything that it's not going to be an easy fix for this team. There's as a young Prince of Denmark once said, there's something rotten in the state of Denmark, and so it is today that there is something rotten in the Senators organization, and that malaise and that sort of like losing attitude and mentality and that sort of like complacency is real, and I think Jacques Martin has given voice to it in recent weeks, and I think Senators fans who might have felt that privately or under wraps are also giving voice to it now and saying that there's something rotten in this team, and we know it stems from previous ownership, and slowly but surely some of those changes are being made. We got rid of our underperforming GM, we got rid of our underperforming coach, other underperforming coaches within the organization are getting moved around, and we're going to touch on that in a little bit. But there's a lot of things off ice that can change that will have an impact on this team going forward. In terms of on ice, I mean, there's some players that are in the long-term plans of this team that have been underperforming, but really, I mean, it's hard to look past the goaltending. I mean, Korpisalo had a .772 save percentage on Saturday night and turned what should have been, a dominant performance where we put up 41 shots and would have had, 7 or 8 goals, if not for Blackwood having a pretty good night, turned into a game that we very nearly lost because our goalie was getting scored on at basically every opportunity, every real scoring chance was going in the net. And that's been happening all season. The Senators' save percentage has been going down every year since the pandemic restart. And while I do recognize that not all of it is necessarily due to personnel, there are wider systematic failings within the organization, defensively, coaching-wise, that kind of inadequacy that we've already spoken about, that makes good goaltenders come here and be bad, and makes bad goaltenders leave here and be good. But I also think in the case of a guy like Korpisalo, if you come to a new team and your results immediately crater, you have to take some onus and some responsibility for that. Because even if, you're being badly coached and the team around you is worse defensively than you're used to, I mean, if you come in and your save percentage drops 30 points, that's a you problem. And Korpisalo, as someone, amusingly pointed out on Twitter, Forpisalo, in reference to his very high goals against average. He's been probably the most significant problem, the most significant barrier that this team has had this year. And we can touch on his contract and what that might mean going forward later in this episode. But to circle back and answer your initial question, Matt, off ice, there's a lot that needs to change. And I think those changes are happening slowly, and that's good. And it'll take time. Certainly this season is a wash, and we're hoping that some of the positive change can take place behind the scenes heading into next season and start fresh with a new attitude, a new mindset, better resources and everything available. But I mean, if there's any chance of this season getting back on the rails somehow. Korpisalo, solving the Korpisalo question has to be at the heart of it. And I don't have an easy answer, but he's the number one issue right now.
Interesting. Okay, well, two different responses from both of you guys. I think I lean more into the camp of other Matt and needing a right-handed defenseman to come in and help stabilize this group. But obviously that potentially comes at a cost of a guy who's making more money and would need to come out of the lineup if the Sens, go hunting for a bigger name. And one name that's come up in rumors lately is Mackenzie Weegar. Of course, he's from Ottawa, and that immediately sparks conversation because he's from Ottawa, he's 30, he's a right-handed defenseman, and he's good defensively. Wow, amazing. So Mackenzie Weegar is someone who I think Sens fans talked about a couple years ago when he was heading towards his free agency year, and he got traded for Matthew Tkachuk, and that kind of set things in motion with him ending up signing long-term with the Calgary Flames. But it's interesting that Pagnotta, and again, not sure the accuracy of the rumor, so I'm just going to preface it with that, but he says that Sens management is again interested in Mackenzie Weegar. After this year, Mackenzie Weegar has 7 more years at $6.25 million. He has good defensive metrics, both at 5-on-5 and on the penalty kill, and he's had a good number of points this season too. He's got 9 goals, 17 assists in 43 games played. So definitely not a slouch offensively either. Now, of course, that raises the question, well, where's that money going to come from? If that were to be a case of, Ottawa looking to bring in Weegar. And I know, Matt, one name that we talked about prior to recording was Thomas Chabot. Of course, making $8 million for another 4 seasons after this one. Is he a guy who could potentially be on the way out so that the Sens can, bring that defensive core as to having 2 left-handed shots, 2 right-handed shots in the top 4? And because you were a bit passionate about this before we recorded, I'm going to let you go on it first.
I'm not sure passionate's the right word, but I think there's a yearly cycle of whenever there is, as we get closer to the trade deadline, that Mackenzie Weegar is somehow linked to the Ottawa Senators. It's probably the 3rd year in a row now. I think Weegar is a very good player, and I would be happy to have him on my team, and I would have been happy to have him on my team last year and the year before that. But when it comes to Thomas Chabot, I look at the 2 players, and I think Chabot at his peak is much better than Mackenzie Weegar at his peak. And that's not slouching on Mackenzie Weegar. I think he's a very good defenseman. I just think Chabot at his best is just that damn good. And I really think we are seeing a Thomas Chabot that is still filled with some DJ Smith hockey in him. We see glimpses of it. We see glimpses of brilliance from Thomas Chabot where he's exceptional in his own end and exceptional in the offensive zone, and he's able to move the puck seamlessly and make passes that even forwards and good forwards would be very happy to be able to make. But I don't think the guy that you should trade for Mackenzie Weegar is Thomas Chabot, because he's got 4 years left after this season on an $8 million deal. Sure, that's steep, but the cap's going up. You also are going to be bringing in a new head coach this coming season, because once they have enough separation from DJ Smith, I really think these guys will be able to move on mentally and say, all right, we've got a new coach. Like, we got to show him some loyalty and respect here. Hustle, loyalty, respect for my John Cena fans. But I think acquiring a 30-year-old defenseman that still has 7 years left at 6.2 is pretty damn steep. And that's giving up a guy who was in the trenches for you for 4 previous years of some of the worst Ottawa Senators hockey I've ever seen. I don't think that's the move. If they really truly are connected to to Mackenzie Weegar, I don't think it's Shabbat.
Yeah, fair. And, we were talking about that right-handed defensive position.
Yeah.
You brought up Travis Hamonic earlier. I think he might be a candidate for a buyout this summer. The Ottawa Senators have around $5 million coming off the books anyway from guys like Murray and Bobby Ryan. And the cap hit for Hamonic through the next 2 seasons, if he was bought out this summer, would be just under $370,000. So it'd be a really low cap hit. Would save the Sens, decent amount of money over the next 2 seasons, or at least cap hit that they could,
just
bring
save
in.
Sens fans Twitter hatred alone.
Yeah, but it would also give the Sens enough money to bring in, a depth player at league minimum or what have you,
for sure,
who would be better. This year, for example, I brought it up earlier in the season, but Calvin DeHaan, a guy who's from the Ottawa area, he has roots. He has a brewery in Carp. Like he
Ridge
owns,
Rock, baby.
Yeah, he owns business in the city. And he still has positive defensive analytics and all that, and is a contributing player. And he signed for league minimum with Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
So Ottawa could have gotten a hometown guy like that to fill a similar role that Travis Hamonic is filling now or at least allegedly filling now for the Sens. So I think that's interesting. But yeah, I think the appealing part of Mackenzie Weegar to a lot of people is, again, that he is very defensively responsible. He can still put up points. So he's like the prototypical, or if that's the right word, to like two-way defenseman. He can fit in wherever you need him to, and he has that right shot, which of course is very appealing for the Sens, because aside from Zub, they've either let them go, i.e. Dylan DeMello, or they've never really had like a solid one to begin with. And I think they wanted that for Cody Ceci and hung on to him for so long because they believed he would be that in Ottawa. He never was that in Ottawa. And now that cycle of we need a right-hand defenseman continues to linger. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, I can't disagree with you there. I also wanted to bring up Chychrun because I've seen a lot of people saying, well, maybe Chychrun's on his way out. But it was interesting. Elliot Freeman on the 32 Thoughts podcast said the Sens aren't rushing to trade a player like Chychrun. They're just taking calls on their players across the board to evaluate what league interest is in their players. And I think that's a fair approach. You don't want to jump into anything. You don't want to rush make a deal, especially when you're losing like they are right now. That's just a recipe for disaster. So for Steos and Poulin and Bonus to just be taking calls, seeing what other teams think of their players, what the market's like on maybe some of the guys who do have term, not pointing out particular names, just in general, I think that makes sense. And you just kind of want to see, is a team willing to offer you something? Like when it came to Philadelphia, they said when Jamie Drysdale's name came up as being a trade piece for Cutter Gauthier, they were like, okay, yeah, we like that guy. He's a young player, high draft pedigree. That's a guy that let's bring in. Let's do this deal. And I think Ottawa, if they're going to make a trade, it'll be something like that. Another team will maybe have been quietly thinking about shopping maybe a younger player, or maybe a player who middle of his career, but a good player. And maybe they'll be like, hey, listen, Ottawa, have you guys any interest in this guy? And maybe the Sens will be all over that. Some Archer tail in Bennett's shot. Love it. But yeah, so it's an interesting discussion to be had. But one of the topics that I wanted to also get to is one that kind of hits on Bennett's point about goaltending, and that would be the newest change for the Ottawa Senators.
I think we should ask Bennett what he thinks about Mackenzie Weegar.
Yeah, Bennett, you know what? I got distracted by the cat, and I was like, maybe it's time to get Bennett back in this thing, involved. Figured we talk about the new changes in coaching staff. But yeah, story Bennett. What are your thoughts on a guy like Mackenzie Weegar and Ottawa potentially being interested in him?
Yeah, I think I'm largely with you guys. I think Weegar is a great player. He's performed very well, even for an underwhelming Calgary team. I think it's always amusing. Ottawa fans always feel that we have, a God-given right to every player born in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. It's in a similar way to the way that Montreal fans feel that every Francophone player in the league wants to play for Montreal, regardless of whether that's actually true or not. And you saw that with like the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade stakes last year. And it's like everyone in the media and their dog was acting as if like, he was going to go to Montreal, no doubt about it. And then, of course, he's like, actually, why would I go to Montreal when I can go make way more money and live in the sunshine 24/7 in LA? Thank you very much. Anywho, so all that being said, I think Weegar would be an interesting fit. I just think it's a kind of a short-term solution for what you were saying. He's 30 years old. Both Chabot and Chychrun are a few years younger than that. He's making a big money for the outside years of that deal that's going to take him till he's like 37, and he's still going to be making big money. I think it'd be kind of a short-term solution. And I know Ian Mendez, friend of the show, wrote a really great piece in The Athletic recently talking about the short-termism that's often plagued the Senators, and some of the biggest moves that have blown up in their face, trading for Duchesne or trading for DeBrincat, were moves that looked good on paper for a short period of time, but didn't show a lot of like long-term strategic vision. I think in both cases, like guys on expiring contracts that didn't end up signing in Ottawa. And that's not the case here with Weegar, but I think it's like trading a young asset plus maybe some change or something to acquire a guy for his 30 plus years. I think it's just like not really the move that the Senators need to make right now.
Well, now that I have Bennett's thoughts, thank you for that, Bennett. Now I can move to the next topic, and we'll get to Ottawa's latest change behind the bench. And they've promoted Justin Peters, who was the goalie coach for the Belleville Senators. He will now be the goalie coach for the Ottawa Senators. And in a corresponding move, they have reassigned Zach Burke, the current Ottawa Senators goalie coach, to be in a scouting and development position in the front office. Personally, I think this is a great move. They brought in Burke under Dorion when they were trying to get Matt Murray's game back to playoff caliber, and it didn't get there. And then, Ottawa's never really had good goaltending since. There were times where Talbot was good, but mostly mediocre. Obviously, Forsberg last season, mediocre. This season, both goalies have been not great at all. So I think it was time for a change. I'm hoping Justin Peters has a great track record, especially in Belleville recently. Their goaltenders have done much better in the last few years. And I think that there's a bit of a correlation there between bringing in a guy like Justin Peters and the increasing performance of Ottawa Senators goaltending prospects. So would love to see how that translates to the NHL. And I think for me, this is a great move. And I really hope that this brings some positivity and kind of a new perspective to goaltending for both Korpisalo and when he gets back from injury, Forsberg. And since Sogard is probably going to be in the NHL for a while until Forsberg gets back, I think this is great to keep consistency with Sogard and make sure that he's been on point in the AHL. Keep the coach with him who has made him be on point and look like the top goaltending prospect for this club. So that's where I'm going with that. Bennett, I'll let you hit on this one first, and then I'll throw it over to Matt.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's fair to say that goalie results under Burke's tenure since he joined the team in 2021 have been extremely terrible. The team's save percentage was .904 when he joined the team in 2021-22. It dropped to .895 the year after that. And so far this season, it is .882. So he is presided over a team that has had consistently decreasing save percentage since he's been the team's goalie coach. I think it's obvious that a change needed to be made. The only downside to this, I think, is that my preference would be for him to be scouting for a new job entirely. I just think that kind of second-rate talent has no place in the organization going forward. And I just like, he's been so bad as a goalie coach that I don't even trust him to evaluate goaltending as a scout. Like, why would you keep someone on who's been so like uniquely terrible at his mentorship of goalie talent? Like, why would you want someone like that to be picking your future goalie talent? I mean, that's like a prime sort of like Melnick era, just like you signed your contract with the team prior to insert date that Melnick died. It's like, just fire all of them. Like, that's, I keep telling you, man, like, if there's a busboy at Club Red that was hired under Melnick, I think he should be fired as a point of principle. And I think you just start from there and move your way up the organization. So anyway, that being said, yes, I support him no longer being our goalie coach, if that wasn't clear.
Thank you, Bennett. That was very thorough. Matt, how are you feeling with the new goaltending coaching changes?
I think it's a great move. It's hard to look at Zach Burke's results as a goaltending coach and let it provide you any sort of hope or positivity. I have seen a lot of takes where it's a lot of people saying, oh, you know, they do, like, Korpisalo and Forsberg do this and da 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 da. Peters isn't going to come in and change their style of goalie. They're not going to change how they play goalie. They're going to figure out how best to work their system around their net and economize their movements and all that sort of stuff. Ian Clark is the goaltending coach for the Vancouver Canucks, and he's been the goaltending coach there for quite some time now. And I love what every year the Canucks post a new video of him working with Thatcher Demko and then their backup. And I just love watching him work with the goalies because he speaks really eloquently. He's very intelligent. And I would have loved to sort of see that behind the scenes into Zach Burke's style or what have you, because it's really hard to evaluate a goalie coach when nobody's going to cover them at a practice or what have you. What I do like, though, is that Justin Peters played in the NHL. Justin Peters has played professional hockey up until 2019, 2020. And he is a young guy who knows that the style changes. Zach Burke was closing in on 50 years old, and it's kind of hard to have a good line on modern day goaltending when you're kind of out of touch with it. I would really like to see one thing I find that Forsberg and Korpisalo don't do nearly enough is fight through screens. They kind of, whenever they hear a shot being taken or something like that, they just kind of drop down and hope for the best. In Vancouver, they fight through screens. I've watched their goaltending practices where Thatcher Demko has a drill where he's fighting through screens, and I just don't see it enough with the Ottawa Senators goalie. So I think it's going to be really good to bring in new perspective, a fresh perspective, and a fresh philosophy on the position. And at the same time, Matt, you made a really, really good point on bringing the guy who has really helped Sogard succeed this season. He's got a .920 save percentage. And everybody who is saying, like, oh, you know, Sogard shouldn't start, don't like put him up to this, like, that's silly. Sogard has earned his cash. The money difference in the AHL to the NHL is drastic. If you're coming up to play in the NHL and you sit on the bench the entire time somebody's injured, what's the point? Especially when the guy you're fighting with has like an 880 save percentage. Doesn't make sense. I wanted to play Sogard yesterday so we could get on Saturday so we could get on a run and you could sort of let him keep going. We saw how good Sogard was at the start of his tenure last season. He was 5-1, had a .920, .915 save percentage. And then he obviously fell off cliff because the Sens started playing badly again. But if the Sens are playing well, he will play well, and just play the kid and see how it goes. But I really like this move. I was shocked that he wasn't fired when DJ was gone. It didn't make sense at the time, and I'm kind of bummed it's taken this long. But yeah,
no, great perspective. Interesting comparison to, you know, Vancouver and what they've done to coach their goaltenders. I think it's also interesting to look at all the goaltender save percentages that have played for the Ottawa Senators under Zach Burke. And shout out to Jacob Billington because he put out a great list.
I saw that tweet. I was looking for it. It was so good.
Yeah. So the goaltending under Zach Burke, and he put a minimum game requirement of 5. Murray was top of the list with a 914 save percentage. Second was Forsberg with a 908. And then it drops below 900. You have Gustafsson, Cam Talbot both sitting at 898. And then Sogard at an 889 and Korpisalo at an 884. Personally, I think Sogard definitely deserves a shot. Listen, I know I've defended Korpisalo and goaltending in general quite a bit on the podcast. That said, I think giving Korpisalo some time with Justin Peters to work, no pressure of a game, just get him, maybe playing a bit differently, whether that's, fine-tuning how he's positioning his glove or like Matt said, learning to play with screens or crease pressure and trying to determine how to stand his ground and maybe get a better angle on shots coming through traffic is something he should focus on. Let Sogard take a run. He's been a hell of a goaltender in the AHL this season. He deserves to get a shot. Let's just see what he can do. Like, I don't think
let him cook.
There's nothing to really lose in the season, correct? So just let him go for it and see what happens. And that's kind of my thought process. I really like goalies, so I would love to one day, get a Sogard jersey. So
don't.
Hey, I got a Craig
Korpisalo one is not doing so.
I got Craig Anderson when he was traded to the Sens, and that worked out just fine. So
yeah,
1 for 2, and there's still time left on Forsberg's contract to turn that around. And I think that's what we'll get to next, because we took a mailbag question from a listener. They sent me a message and they want to ask us a question. And if you have questions that you want us to answer, please drop us a comment below, or you can see our social medias on the overlay. Feel free to DM us, whether it's on Twitter or Reddit, Discord, Instagram, anything like that. If you have a question you want us to answer on the podcast, shoot it over to us. We are going to try and do a mailbag question, at least 1 or 2 every episode. I would like to. So feel free to drop that. And the one we got for this week was, would you guys consider buying out Korpisalo this summer? So that is quite the question. I'm going to throw it over to Bennett first to get his thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's something that, Stairs has a new GM, new in his tenure. I think he's taking his time, taking stock of everything, doing due diligence. I think he absolutely has to consider it. I don't know that it's something that I would want to do. I think that, I was harsh on Korpisalo before, and I think, he has to own a significant portion of his poor results so far. I do think that giving him at least another season to maybe settle in with a new goalie coach is probably the best thing to do. And part of that is also because the Senators have had a lot of dead cap in the last few years. We're buying out Bobby Ryan's contract for several years. We're buying out part of Matt Murray's contract. There's just been a lot of dead cap, and I know that there's been a lot of mistakes that have led to that dead cap. And I think Korpisalo would be another one of those, but I think you got to give him at least another season. But I mean, on a short leash, right? Like if he works in the off season and everything with a new goalie coach, and if we're able to address some defense deficiencies, and then he starts pretty well in the next year, then great. But if he doesn't, then I think you definitely have to consider moving on from him.
Yeah, and just before I throw it over to Matt, another point that I wanted to bring up is Forsberg has 1 year left after this one. So if Sogard can prove himself, it might actually be more worthwhile for the Sens to either trade Forsberg, or if they can't find a partner, maybe buy him out, as it would only be 2 years at $900K versus Korpisalo, where you're looking at 8 years and it starts off 333, like 333K, goes 833, and then you're going up to nearly 2 million, over 2 million, and then drops to 1.3 million for 4 years. So you're definitely hanging on the money quite a bit longer. But with that said, Matt, don't let that force you into saying yes or no. What do you feel before knowing that the buyout would be 8 years? What are your thoughts on it?
I don't like buyouts as a principle, especially if there's 2 years left on a contract. because we're then paying a player to probably go play for another team, secure a bag there, and still pay them. And in this case, for 8 years. That's dumb. That's dumb money management. You could probably retain money on it and send it out somewhere. I like Bennett's point is exactly like, get out of my head there, Bennett. You want to see how he's going to like react with another goalie coach. You want to see how he reacts to an improved defensive structure and a new head coach. All of these are going to be factors. I still believe like Korpisalo has been on bad Columbus Blue Jackets teams. And seemingly, I don't know how this Senators defense is still worse than those. Once again, don't know how. I look at who's on paper and it just doesn't make sense. I think both of our goalies can get back to being league average goalies. I really do. I don't think there's it's not that hard, but I think it has a lot to do with structure, within their crease and themselves, as well as our defensive structure and how we play as a defensive unit. Next year, you run it, you go the full season and you see how it goes. And then he suddenly has 3 years left on his deal. And let's say you retain 1.5 of that, suddenly that is a $2.5 million deal that a team is getting if they are defensively responsible and well structured, they suddenly get a strong backup for 2.5.
Yeah, and the one thing Dorion did right about this contract is he didn't make it backloaded like Matt Murray's. He made it front loaded. So that helps as well with the buyouts. And definitely, the contract being $4 million and not $6+ million for a goaltender,
Absolutely.
Also quite helpful if you're trying to move it. So I will give Dorion credit for that. He was like, hey, listen, I learned my mistake from Matt Murray in backloading a contract. This time, lower AAV, front load it. That way it's easier to trade or buy it.
Yeah. And I think you have to kind of look at giving Korpisalo that big contract. It's a 5-year over for $4 million a season. And it's definitely like a look. Like you're going after a guy who was injured the year prior, comes back and has a good season. And then sort of tends to fall apart at the end of the season because he was worked really hard. I think for me, if I would have signed Korpisalo and Matt, you obviously remember the goalie video we did, before the end of the season last season, and Korpisalo wasn't a name we talked about. One of the guys I was really interested in getting was Alex Nedeljkovic, and he's doing pretty well on Pittsburgh. You have to look for a guy that you can sort of buy low on that has upside. But Korpisalo just played his best season ever, and you are buying high on the best season. I didn't hate the deal when we signed it. I thought it was a little long, but $4 million is about what you want to be paying like a league average starting goalie. But to buy him out and to buy Forsberg out too, dumb. Both buying out either of those is dumb. You can trade both of those contracts, especially next season. Well, you can trade Forsberg's contract, no problem next season. He's got he's a backup goalie who has decent career results on a good team. He'll be fine. I think even Hamonic, I would just bury him in the minors next year. Like
he has a no move clause.
Well, I will force him there.
You will personally drive him to Belleville.
Yeah. Bring it on, Travi.
Oh man, I hope he hears this. And then he's like, yo, what'd you say? At Matt Nave. CTC parking lot. Let's go.
Bring it on.
All right. Well, On that note, nothing else left to touch on. Went through a lot today, so thank you everybody for watching or listening. Really appreciate it. I'm just gonna say my 2 cents. No, I don't think they should buy out for. I was gonna say for Korpisalo.
Oh,
now
that's
Bennett.
so
now
good.
Bennett has it in my head.
It's,
Oh my god!
I cannot claim credit for it, but I am officially adopting it.
Yeah, it's also pretty
that's
apt
painful.
that our other goalie is literally Anton Forsberg. So
Yeah, it's a lose for me.
Yeah.
I was gonna say 4 regardless. No, I don't think they should buy a Korpisalo. I'm in agreement. Give him another season. See, is it the team or is it him? Get him some time with Justin Peters and see if that helps sort out his game. And let's get at it next season. Sadly, got to talk about next season already. And yeah, go from there. So thank you everybody for watching or listening. Really appreciate it. Like I said, if you have any questions you want us to answer in a future episode, please drop some comments below or feel free to reach out to us on all of our social media platforms that are listed here. And yeah, thank you so much. Go Sens go. And let's see how they do for the rest of the season. Trade deadline coming up in just under a couple months.
go Sens go.
Yep.
See you at the weekly recap.